Welcome to another episode of the Pharma Founders Academy. And today, this topic is going to be of interest to pharma founders of startups, of growing businesses, and even any executive in a pharmaceutical or biotechnology operations. And this topic is definitely going to hit home for most of you because there is work pressure in the workplace and stress as well. So we're going to be looking at how to deal with stress, how to convert that negative energy into positive energy to boost your productivity and ultimately your pharmaceutical or pharma sales. And the guest I have with me has got tons of experience in brain science and business strategy. So who else is the right person to do this such a conversion? And her neuroscience-based approach empowers business owners, executives, and teams to transform high-pressure challenges. And every pharma company definitely has that, and she'll be doing that. I'm not going to go any further because I don't want to steal the thunder from her. And my guest is Diane Wolf, who is a psychotherapist, a speaker, author, and she is a resilience and business strategist. And she is also a former business professor at one of the universities in Canada, and she is based in Canada. And she is the founder of Diane Wolf Consulting, and her name is Diane Wolf. And I must let you know that she is no relation to Toto Wolf of Mercedes. So, welcome, Diane.
Thank you, James. I'm delighted to be here.
Now, folks, Diane and I, we met in this group known as the $1 Million Icon Maker Program, and that's we are members of that program. And Diane, why don't you let us know a little bit about your background?
Well, I remember the night I fell in love with neuroscience. It was in the 1980s. I was taking a course in psychology at the university. And one night, Carlisle Smith, a renowned sleep researcher, did a lecture on neuroscience. And as he spoke, I became absolutely fascinated with all the things he was telling us about the brain. And after the lecture, I went down to the bottom of the stairs where he was, and I said, "Can I just ask you a question?" And we stood there for an hour as I just became completely enraptured. And at the end of the hour, I remember him saying, "What's your name?" And all of a sudden I thought, oh, I've just bothered this man for a whole hour. But I realized later he was absolutely enthralled by the fact that a student was so enthusiastic she would stay and ask questions for an hour. He ended up becoming my thesis supervisor a number of years later when I did a neuroscience study, when I was by that point doing neurophysiological psychology, and I had to do brain surgery on 220 rats, and he was my supervisor. So that's when I fell in love with brain science. And I've never stopped learning. I know that you're quite aware. What we learned in neuroscience in the 1980s, for example, there was no such thing as neuroplasticity. You had this many neurons, when they die, they die. And 20 years later, we're talking about how different areas of the brain can actually take over the function from areas of the brain that might have been damaged. They can create new neural pathways. So I will never stop studying neuroscience because every decade we find out more and more that we didn't even know was possible before.
All right, now that is fascinating. 220 rats. I mean, in school, I had experience dissecting, I think, frogs and some other creatures, but definitely not rats, and nowhere near even 100 of these creatures. So that must have been really fascinating to study the brains of rats. And
Yes.
you also did mention about neuroplasticity, which I shall come to in a while, Diane. But before that, I would like to find out, yes, you did mention that you spoke to the speaker and that kind of triggered you, but what created that passion in neuroscience?
Well, I just think I was so fascinated by all the different structures in the brain and trying to figure out what they do. And that really led me, it started with me doing the The surgery I did on the rats was related to a sleep study. So I've been studying sleep for over 40 years. And as you know, that's one of my passions. I believe that sleep is the foundation of mental health. But I also recognized very soon that stress and anxiety and depression, while they are very real, there are a lot of things that you can do when you know about the brain science and how I always say to my clients in psychotherapy, your brain is not broken. Much of what we respond to in terms of stress is a defense mechanism that the brain uses to protect us. So I became really fascinated with how could we rewire our brains and handle things like anxiety and depression and stress from a neurological perspective. And that's what I've been passionate about for the last 40 years.
Diane, that sounds like a paradox that the brain uses stress to protect itself, but at the end of the day, it damages us,
Well,
right?
think of your car. The check engine light comes on, and it might be a yellow light. And you're not going to say, oh, well, that's just normal. I'll just let that go. You realize it's a signal of a problem. And a stress response is basically your brain's way of saying, hello, are you paying attention? There's something going on that you need to deal with, whether you're having sleep disturbances or headaches or a racing heart or agitation. I do want to be careful, though, to say that I'm not a doctor. And if you do have any of those symptoms, of course, you want to seek out a medical professional to get them checked. But years ago, when I was having anxiety, probably from being an overachiever, I was having chest pains and heart palpitations. So, of course, I went to my doctor. And of course, they did the heart tests. And at the end of it, he said, oh, your heart is fine. It's just anxiety and stress. And I thought, what do you mean it's just anxiety and stress? I'm having physical symptoms. But that's when I realized those symptoms were the brain's way of saying to me, you have to change something in your life or you will be sick. This really hit home as a psychotherapist now in private practice. I work primarily with first responders who've been diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, depression, and they've said things to me like, where were you 15 years ago? If I had learned these strategies back then, maybe I could have avoided a complete breakdown. And while I can't promise you can avoid a breakdown, I do know the sooner you listen to your check engine light and do something about it, the less likely you are to have the red light come on and pull you over.
Diane, from that just 1.5 minutes of your explanation, tons of questions have popped into my mind, and I don't know where to start. I think the first word that comes to my mind is psychosomatic, because that's what you were saying. Stress, affects our body, and I get it when you say that that stress is like the orange light that comes up on your car dashboard that there's something wrong. And if you don't do anything, then it becomes red. So stress is probably a first indicator that there's something wrong, and therefore do something about it. Don't let it go. So therefore, is there a way that we could, consistently test and see if what we're going through is stress, and therefore we need to do something about it?
That's a really great question. So the stress response, also known as the fight or flight response, when your brain perceives that you are in danger, it floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline to prepare you to either fight the wild animal or run away from danger. That is a response that is supposed to happen on a rare and temporary basis. So you're driving down the highway, the car in front of you slams on the brakes. You don't have time to go, oh, that car is slamming on its brakes. Perhaps I should slow down. No, you go, and you slam on the brakes. It's an instant response. Your heart is racing, you're tense, you're flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. And then after a few minutes, it's like, okay, all right, I'm okay. And so, if that happens on a rare and temporary basis, it's probably not going to cause any huge problems. Your body is designed to do that. The problem is, we live in a world with chronic stress. Every day, we're rushing, we're not getting enough sleep, we're trying to meet deadlines. And they're all responses that don't require a physical response necessarily. So, our body is constantly being flooded with that cortisol and adrenaline and getting us all hyped up, and there's nowhere for it to go. So, of course, the number one strategy then is physical exercise. When you find yourself feeling tense and agitated, you're about to go into a presentation and it's really important and you might not get the contract and your heart is racing, After you've done that presentation, go up and down the stairs, go for a walk, listen to calming music. There are all sorts of things that you can do. From a medical standpoint, what we're talking about is the sympathetic nervous system has been activated, and now we have to deactivate it. We have to bring it back down again. And we do that by releasing the cortisol and adrenaline with some physical activity. That's our number one strategy.
I think, Diane, I seem to be, on the other side of the bell curve. Um, I seldom face stress, and I've been told that as well. So I'm one of the fortunate ones. But I do get butterflies in my stomach before I have to give a speech, or even today before this interview, I had to practice, and therefore what I do is that I tend to increase my exercise intensity days before the event, so that on that day I don't feel that much, and therefore I after post event I don't need to release those cortisols. The moment it starts, I find that the cortisol levels drop. So I'm probably one of the outliers, and most people are within the peak of the bell curve. So it may work differently for each one of us. And this reminds me, earlier you had mentioned that first responders have asked you where you were 15 years ago. And just last month, while I was working with a mental health pharmaceutical company, the CEO was explaining to me that most PTSD people do not need drugs if their PTSD has been diagnosed early and they go through, I think he mentioned CBT, and if they do, then they don't need drugs. And if they don't go through that, that's when the drugs come in. And once you're on drugs, apparently you can never get off it. Is that true, Diane, from your experience?
Well, I think that is a really good point. And the earlier we can diagnose PTSD, basically, the earlier we can help someone to recognize that their sympathetic nervous system is activated. PTSD, people who deal with PTSD are hypervigilant. They have difficulty sleeping. And if this goes on for a number of years, it does become very difficult to get through without medication. And many of my clients do take medication. But when we catch it early and we learn these strategies, you mentioned that you might be an outlier. I would suggest that you've just naturally started using some of these strategies proactively, because I always talk to my clients about two different phases. Phase one is when you're completely stressed out. We're doing it as a response. We're learning to deal with it. Then on an ongoing basis, you want to basically live in equilibrium where your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system are sort of on an equal basis. So that means you are also doing maybe things like yoga, a supportive network. There are all sorts of things that I ask people to do on a proactive basis so that when the next stressful event comes, they're far better equipped to deal with it. So, yes, the earlier we can help someone manage stress, the more likely it is they can handle it without medication. And I spoke with a psychiatrist a number of years ago, and he said that there are five pillars of dealing with stress, of mental health. And sleep, of course, as I mentioned, is a foundation. Being well hydrated is also very important. Eating fuel foods that fuel your body is also very important. Having a support network, whether that's a therapist or friends or family or people you can share with. And he said those four are mandatory. Number five is medication, and it's optional. It really depends on where you are in the journey. And yes, medication can be very helpful, and my clients do take it when needed. But if it's caught early, that's the only one of those five pillars that's optional.
Okay, and we will dive into the five or four pillars of mental health in a while. Now, I wanted to just relate this story. You had mentioned physical exercise, and years ago, about 20 plus years ago, in one of the pharma companies I was working in, we had a new CEO, and he was from Australia. And if you know anything about the Australians, they work hard, but they play very hard as well. And the first week he was in the company, he at 5:30 he would walk around as he was leaving the office and tell everybody, head home. I don't want you guys to hang around here and work until 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. And eventually we all got the message. And but I think some of us ended up in the bar rather than in the gym. Um, but coming back to this physical exercise, Diane, do you think in the workplace it is advisable that that uh, CEOs and company owners they make it kind of the advice or maybe even mandatory for their staff to sign up for gym memberships so that they would be able to mitigate the stress that they may experience at work.
Well, signing up for gym membership is a good start, but we all know that people often don't go. I worked with a corporation a number of years ago, Consumers Distributing here in Canada, to do some consulting, and I was absolutely astonished. This company had a daycare on site and they had a gym on site. And so the level of stress in that company was so much lower because people on their lunch hour could just go downstairs to the workout room. And they also knew their children were being taken care of in the same building. And if a child was sick, two floors above, mom gets a call or dad gets a call, they can run down and check on their child. So in an ideal world, if a company had a gym on site, that would be great. However, in order to reduce the levels of stress, we don't need to do a fancy 1 hour workout. I mean, I do recommend going to the gym and having a regular workout, but strictly speaking, from stress reduction, we need to find something to do that gets our heart rate up, the blood flowing, the cortisol and adrenaline dissipating. It doesn't have to be high impact. We don't have to go running. It just has to be higher intensity. You could literally go up and down a few flights of stairs and be lifting your arms at the same time and have a really good effect. So if companies would encourage their employees just by saying, if you feel like you're really, hitting that level and you're feeling agitated and stressed, go outside for 10 minutes or go up and down the stairs. That's really all they would need to do is encourage employees to feel like I can take a 10-minute break and be active.
And so it is optional to go to the gym, but you also mentioned going out. So does it have to be in a natural environment, in the woods, or be surrounded by plants and trees and stuff like that?
Well, that's ideal. In fact, the Japanese call it forest bathing or nature bathing. They have a whole ideology around people going out into nature, and lots of studies have been done on the calming effect of nature. So, yes, in an ideal world, go out in the woods for 10 minutes. In reality, if you work in a big city and there's just concrete and cement around you, that's not realistic. So, if possible, go outside into nature. And if that's not possible, then as I say, up and down a few flights of stairs, listen to some soothing music maybe while you do that. I think we can all work around it. We often think, well, I can't really do that where I am, so I'll do nothing. And the answer is, what can I do in my environment? I can't go out into the forest. I'm in the middle of the city. What can I do to release that cortisol and adrenaline? Do I go for a 5-minute brisk walk and then close my eyes and picture the forest or listen to some music? We all need to get really good at figuring out what is possible instead of just going, well, I can't go to the gym and I can't go out in the nature, so I guess I'll just suffer with stress.
Okay. And you have given us quite a number of strategies here. Diane, go to the gym, get out of your room or office or even the building for a while, preferably in nature. But what about, as you said, if you are in a concrete jungle? Would, for example, having or looking at your computer screen with an image of the ocean or of the woods, would that help?
That is a really interesting question because it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Our computer screens emit blue light, and blue light has an effect on us that causes us to be more wakeful. And what you really want, if you want to relax, is a warm yellow light. So sitting in front of a computer screen, there's a downside to that. However, I would also say we're all individuals. If you look at a picture on your computer screen and you feel soothed and relaxed, go for it. But just be aware that we'd like to ideally get away from the computer screen for this.
I think most of us have heard about the negative effects of blue light, and therefore, as Diane says, avoid that and go for warm yellow. So that's great. Now, Diane, let's shift gears a bit and have a look at, you had mentioned about mental health. what would you consider as the optimal mental health state?
Wow. Well, for starters, you wake up in the morning feeling refreshed. And that's a really big one. I mentioned earlier that I believe that sleep is the foundation of mental health. We are living in a sleep deprived society. And with all of my clients, the first thing I work on is sleep. If you are sleep deprived, all of my great advice about everything else is really not going to have nearly the impact it needs to. And many of us don't know if our sleep is restorative or not. We talk about how many hours of sleep do you need? And I always say, that's the wrong question. The right question is how much of your sleep is in stages that are restorative. So we have four sleep stages. The first one is where you're almost, that twilight, you're just falling asleep, you're just very, very light. And then you go a bit deeper, and then you go into even deeper in stage three. Stage three is your deepest sleep, and that's where the body does a lot of physical restorative work. So repairing, we don't even know half of what we do in the stage three sleep yet. More research is being done all the time. But they say it's flushing out toxins and rebuilding cells and doing all sorts of very important work. So we need to spend a good time in stage three. Stage four is actually what we call our rapid eye movement sleep. It's different from the first three, which are non-REM sleep. Rapid eye movement is where we dream, where we're actually paralyzed and can't act out our dreams. And that's the stage when they think a lot of the cognitive reparative work takes place. Our brain is working really hard in the dreaming stage, and it's doing some sort of restorative work cognitively that we don't even yet know all about. And if our sleep is interrupted, let's say I get 8 hours of sleep, but it takes me 10 hours to do that because I keep waking up, I may never get into those deeper stages of sleep for long enough to achieve those restorative functions. So, how do you tell if you're getting enough restorative sleep? If you wake up in the morning before your alarm and you feel refreshed, that's a sign that you're getting enough sleep. If you wake up in the morning and the alarm goes off and you press snooze 10 times and feel like you just want to die, something is wrong. You're not getting enough of the restorative sleep. So I actually wrote a whole book on 14 nights to better sleep, which talks about how to get better sleep. And the very last page is if none of these strategies work, you should ask your doctor about a sleep study where they hook you up to electroencephalogram and they can tell which sleep stages you are in for how long. I have a client recently who had one done, and when she went to see the doctor for the results, he said, "Oh, this is not good." He said she woke up, I forget how many times an hour, but she was having these brief periods of awakening that she wasn't really aware of, but she never got into a restorative sleep. So she was suffering from chronic insomnia. She was always overwhelmed and she was always exhausted and shouldn't even have been driving. Now, for her, they did put her on medication because if everything else fails, they may have to put you on different medications to help you stay asleep. But for most people, you can work on the proper sleep strategies and fix it yourself. But when all else fails, a sleep study will identify whether you're getting into those different stages.
Diane, you have once again mentioned the pillars of mental health and sleep as well. So you had earlier mentioned that medication is probably at the last step or right at the bottom when all the others don't work. But just looking at the first four pillars, um, how would you rank them? Can we even rank them?
Well, I definitely rank sleep as number one. I would rank the next one then as regular physical exercise. So again, two different strategies. One is to use exercise as a band-aid, so to speak, when you're very stressed out, as a temporary how to relieve the fact that right now my heart is racing and I'm agitated. But exercise on a regular proactive basis is extremely important because on a daily basis, it helps you get rid of the cortisol and adrenaline. So having a regular commitment to exercise. There are different studies that have been done in terms of how much exercise should we get. Right now, the advice coming out of the American Physiology Association is 150 minutes a week of exercise that gets your heart rate up to 85% of maximum. And if you go to a gym or you have a personal trainer, they'll help you figure out based on your age and your weight, like what is your, what is that number, 85% of your maximum heart rate. And then, everybody's got a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or something. You can track your heart rate and you know if you're getting up to that level. They say 150 minutes a week. I say for stress management, you need to do 20 minutes a day, which times seven sort of equals 150. But from a stress management perspective, to exercise for 3 hours on a Saturday and not the rest of the week is not going to help. So I say 20 minutes a day every single day. Get your heart rate up.
And therefore, Diane, we are all busy people in the workplace, and 20 minutes a day seems or sounds doable. But can we break up the 20 minutes, or should it be in one block of 20 minutes? Or can it be like, for example, during lunch, I walk up and down the stairs for 10 minutes, and as I'm heading home, I, walk up and down the stairs and make up my 20 minutes for the day. Would that work?
I think that would be just as good. There's another factor that comes into play there, and it has to do with sleep. And that is that our bodies produce a sleep hormone called adenosine. And during the day, the adenosine levels have to build up. And when they reach a sufficient level, we will be able to go to sleep. People who are natural morning people have an easier time building that up. They can go to sleep easier at night. I happen to be by nature a night person, which is difficult because in our society, I would love to go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, get up at 10, and that doesn't work. So I go to bed at 9:30 and get up at 7. And I'm able to do that because I've been practicing that for ages and I sleep really, really well. I'm a super sleeper. But exercise helps build that adenosine level. So particularly for people who have difficulty going to sleep at night, exercising earlier in the day to build up that adenosine is a really good idea. If they exercise too late in the evening, you know that feeling after a workout sometimes when you're really tired and you go to work out and you come back and you're revved up. If you have difficulty getting to sleep, you don't want to exercise too late in the day because that can cause you to be revved up. And it's a very individual, personal thing. There's no formula, it's trial and error. So you really want to figure out, what's sort of after 5 o'clock at night. That's maybe when I'm not going to do any heavy duty exercise. But having several periods during the day, as long as you're getting your heart rate up, you are burning off that cortisol and adrenaline. So I wouldn't go to sort of, 10 times 2 minutes. I can't see much value in that. But two times 10 minutes, sure, why not? Just avoid evening if you're someone who has difficulty getting to sleep.
And one other thing you had mentioned that exercise is a great way to help you help your body get to sleep, provided you do it earlier in the evening. My youngest son, when he was I think about 3 or 4, he was diagnosed with ADHD, and his
Mhm.
pediatrician told us not to feed him sugar after 6 p.m. Otherwise, he would stay awake and keep us awake. So yeah, so I don't know what is your take on avoiding sugar for adults in the
Okay,
evening.
well, I'm not a nutritionist. However, I have been living with ADHD my whole life, and I'm a high energy person to begin with. I mentioned that I have sleep as number one, and then exercise. The next pillar is nutrition. It's how you fuel your body. And so again, with the disclaimer that I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not qualified to tell you specifically what to eat. I will tell you there are certain substances that we call brain fuel, the healthy omega-3 fats that are really important for brain function. And for many people, sugar is an absolute nightmare. It affects your blood sugar levels. For people with ADHD, it can cause all sorts of issues. I eat minimal sugar myself for that very reason. And again, I can't tell people not to eat sugar, but when in doubt, if someone isn't sure, I would say do one of those elimination diet type things. If you're not sure if sugar is negatively impacting your sleep, then give it up for a week or two. And once you get past the first 3 days of cravings, and your body sort of settles down, see if you sleep better. One of my other suggestions is I recommend that people not eat late at night. I don't eat anything after 7 p.m. I go to bed at 9:30 because you don't want your body focusing on digestion when it's trying to go to sleep. Now, as a natural night person, I work really hard to make sure that my evening routine is conducive to me falling asleep. Someone who is a natural morning person, they might be able to eat pizza at midnight and still fall asleep. And that's fine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's just if you're having any difficulty watching what you're eating, avoiding things like sugar, things like processed foods, not eating late at night, those can be very helpful strategies for sure.
Diane, that is very clear. Yeah. So, nutrition and exercise and sleep as well. So let's have a look at these four pillars of mental health. How do they all work together? I
Well,
mean,
the
leaving
fourth one.
medication out of the whole thing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you need the four. I mean, there are five. As I say, you may need medication, and that's a discussion to be had with your doctor or your pharmacist. But the four that are absolutely non-negotiable, the fourth one is having a support network, and that is feeling validated and heard. Again, that's what therapists serve. I mean, that's our function, of course, is to do that. But you don't need to necessarily go to a therapist. If you have someone close to you, whether it's your partner, or maybe you have a friend who's also feeling very overwhelmed and stressed at a similar life stage, someone that you feel you can be completely honest. So often as business owners, we feel like we have to have it all together. We have to be looking like we're very competent and capable and professional, and that's great. But where do we go to fall apart and say, I can't do this. I'm exhausted. I hate my business. I hate my customers. You're not going to say that publicly. So you have to have some people in your life where you can get together and have a coffee or go to the bar or whatever it is and just say, whoa, I'm just really suffering here. I have a strategy I use with two close girlfriends. We call it the 10-minute pity party. And whenever any one of us is feeling really stressed, we get the other two on a Zoom call or in person before COVID or on the phone or something, and we say, I really need to just vent. And one person will set the timer, and for 10 minutes, I get to absolutely vent. I can be unreasonable, unrealistic, unfair, judgmental, whatever I need to be for 10 minutes. And at the end of the 10 minutes, they say, okay, your time's up. Now, do you want us to help you solve this problem, or did you just need to be heard? Because sometimes I just needed somebody. All that people will say during that 10 minutes are things like, oh, wow. Oh, that's so frustrating. Oh, you must have been so upset. They don't get to say, Diane, you're a grandmother and a psychotherapist. Don't you think you should be mature about this and be able to handle it better? I don't need to hear that. I need to hear, honey, it's okay. That sounds stressful. The really funny thing is we don't need 10 minutes. We're at about 3 or 4 minutes of just feeling validated and heard and then going, okay, I'm good. Well, you still have 6 minutes left. No, thank you. I just needed to get that off my chest and know that I'm not crazy for being upset about that. And then, as I say, sometimes my husband, I've been married for 47 years. He's a wonderful man. He tends to be a problem solver. And so, quite often in our marriage, I would complain about something and he would start giving me advice. And I remember one day years ago, I said, I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to say, poor bunny. And he said, poor bunny? I said, I just want you to say, ah, hun. So now whenever I say something, he goes, hold on, is this a you want my advice or is this a poor bunny moment? And it's become this family joke because sometimes you don't want someone to try to help you fix it. You just want to someone to say, I hear you. You're having a hard time. I'm listening and I care. And other times at the end of the conversation, you say, yeah, actually, I would appreciate it if you give me your advice and give me some ideas on how I can handle this. But that kind of support network is worth its weight in gold. And of course, when you think about it, that's ideally what you get from therapy too, right? No judgment, someone who just listens and cares and asks you to think about certain things and doesn't offer solutions unless you're asking for advice. Therapists don't usually give solutions. We just listen and care and say, have you thought about this? And how did that make you feel? And where do you think that might have come from? So it's basically that's what a support network does.
And what you're telling us, Diane, is that everybody needs a therapist, whether it's a professional counselor or a psychotherapist, or even friends, like you have
Yep,
mentioned, or your
yep,
partner. And
yep.
in the workplace, um, I was just thinking, as a leadership coach, I was just thinking, would a leader behaving as a coach with their people, would that also be acting as support and therefore therapy, without giving advice? Because a great coach doesn't give advice, but asks tons of questions, as you mentioned. Have you thought about this? And stuff like that. Would that be considered as support?
I would actually consider that valuable, but almost separate. Because when you really have a support network, you don't need to feel that you have to be professional. If it were my boss, there are a lot of things I would say to my best friend that I would never say to a boss, right? So I think a good leader definitely can produce the kind of environment where people feel comfortable saying, I'm feeling really stressed. This workload this week has been really heavy, those kinds of things. And a leader would say, okay, let's sit down and look at your schedule and see what we can do. I think a good leader can definitely act as a coach in that way, but there has to be certain boundaries. You don't want to be like the things I've said to my friends, they will never repeat to anyone else. This is like my deep, dark secret, my deep feelings. In the workplace, I would never be comfortable being that vulnerable because I need to present my professional persona. With the caveat that, yes, I think a good leader definitely can help employees deal with some problems. But I also think a good leader can say to an employee, I've noticed lately you seem to be really down. Have you thought about going to talk to somebody? A lot of companies do have employee assistance programs or even going to see a therapist. I would be comfortable recommending to one of my employees that it might be helpful to go and talk to somebody. And it's completely confidential. I'll never find out you were there. I'll never find out what you said. But the leader is in a very tenuous position because if you have your employees pouring out their hearts to you with personal problems, that becomes a boundary issue.
Okay. So now that that is clear, so that's the fourth pillar, Diane. So if let me summarize this, Diane. If let's see if I get it right. Of the four pillars, sleep is the most important, and to help you get a good night's sleep, make sure you have the right nutrition. And the timing is also very important. Don't eat too late just before you sleep. And also exercise will also help you get into the sleep mode. But don't exercise too late either. But then all of us are different. So if you can exercise late and fall asleep, that's fine. As well as eat late and sleep well, that's also fine. And finally, it's the support. And better or ideally get your friends as your support network rather than your professional psychotherapist or even your boss. Would that be correct? So ultimately, all the other three would help you get the sleep and therefore you will function better at work. Is that correct, Diane?
Almost. That's very good. I love the way you've summed that up. I would just add about exercise that exercise has more than just the function of helping you sleep. Yes, it's definitely one of the strategies to get good sleep. If you exercise, you build up the sleep hormone. But remember, physical exercise also helps your entire cardiovascular system. It puts you in better physical health. There have been a number of studies that have shown that physical exercise has as great an impact on reducing depression as medication does. And that's not really to do with sleep per se. That's to do with the fact that when you're exercising, it's a mood lifter. The dopamine, the serotonin, all those other hormones we haven't even addressed get going. So the value of exercise, yes, is important for sleep, but also for physical, mental, and emotional health. Exercise is really, really important, which is why I put it at number two, right below sleep.
Diane, we have, you have mentioned about one of the five pillars, which is medication. That's not what we need to discuss here. Definitely beyond our scope and expertise. But would you say that using melatonin, the supplement melatonin, would that be considered as medication or is that nutrition?
Wow. All right. Well, I would put it into the medication label because it does have a medicinal effect. But you know far more about pharmaceuticals than I do. I'm sure there are lots of natural substances that have actually more of a medicinal or therapeutic effect. I know that often people are warned against taking some natural substances thinking it's perfectly healthy because it's natural, when actually it acts as a medication and can disrupt all sorts of things in the body. So I would put that in, personally, I would consider that more of a medication. Um, it's controversial. It's another one of those things that some people find it helps and some people see no result at all. So it's one of those things, because as a psychotherapist, I am not permitted to recommend medications. That's the job of a pharmacist or a doctor. So when people ask me about medications, I always say, you need to talk to your doctor. But if your doctor says try melatonin, then I always say, try it and see what it does for you. See if it helps, if your doctor's prescribed it. Because some people find it very helpful, and for other people, doesn't do anything. And I really don't know why yet.
Okay, yeah, I think it's the individuality of us all.
Yeah.
Everybody's is different, yeah. And there are in the workplace there are many leaders who are not able to handle the stress, either their stress or the stress that their people experience. And what they do is they will tell their employees, relax or calm down. Now, does that work?
I've given a talk actually that, and the title was "Why Telling Someone to Take a Deep Breath or Relax Doesn't Work." And it's the classic response. But here's the problem. The stress response happens when your sympathetic nervous system is activated. And I want you to think of a kid's teeter-totter. You know that thing that kids, it starts like this. A child sits here, a child sits here, and then they go up like this and they go down like that. You have two parts of your autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight reflex, the response. The parasympathetic is what we call the Zen, chill, rest, and digest system. And when you are in a stress response, basically your teeter totter has tipped like that. Your sympathetic nervous system is up here. You're agitated. You're out of breath. Your heart might be racing. And your parasympathetic nervous system has to be at the bottom because they can't be both at the top. The teeter totter is like this. So if one's up, the other one's down. And when your parasympathetic nervous system is completely deactivated, any of those pieces of advice, like take a deep breath, relax, do yoga, calm down, they're designed to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is a wonderful thing, except you can't do that when you're way up here. So when
Mhm.
someone says to you, relax, take a deep breath, and you're completely agitated, it's useless advice because you can't. What you have to do is deactivate the sympathetic nervous system first and then gradually bring up the other one. What deactivates the sympathetic nervous system? We already know this, exercise, right? Get
Yes.
your heart rate up, get around, get tired. Then when you collapse back in your desk going, ah, that's when someone can come to you and say, do you want to talk about this? Let's get a cup of tea. Take a deep breath. We're like, deep breathing is a wonderful, wonderful strategy. I use it every day several times. I'd use the deep belly breathing as a relaxation strategy before I'm giving a talk, before I go into anything that's a little bit scary. But I can't be completely agitated. I have to do that proactively. So deep breathing is a fabulous strategy. I have people from my clients set watches, set timers. Once an hour, I want you to spend 3 minutes doing your deep breathing because that's a proactive approach of activating your parasympathetic nervous system. And the more you can activate it, the more slowly your sympathetic nervous system might get activated. Now, in sudden danger, if I'm outside in the forest and I'm having a lovely walk and I'm completely relaxed and I'm completely zen chill and I hear a noise that sounds like a bear, my sympathetic nervous system is still going to jump right up. But again, your brain is not broken. That's a defense mechanism. Your brain is going, danger, 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 run. And it's a really good thing that is activated. That could save our lives. But again, our problem in our society is we tend to live with an activated sympathetic nervous system because every day we've got these different stressors and we're activating it. How do we then activate the parasympathetic nervous system? So I have grown men that I work with, firefighters and police officers taking yoga classes.
Oh, great.
Proactively, the breathing, the yoga, the relaxing, the Pilates class, whatever it is, that's an ongoing strategy for life, but it's not a band-aid for when you're up here. There's no point. You can't. If, you know what it's like if you're furious and someone says, calm down. Do you just go, oh,
Right.
thank you. I needed to hear that. No, it doesn't work. And that's why it doesn't work. It's physiological that it doesn't work.
And it probably has the opposite effect. When you tell somebody to calm down, they're probably going to be even
They
more.
want to punch you. Yeah, they want to punch you.
Yes. And therefore, Diane, a funny thought just entered my mind. If a leader sees their people having stress, it won't be rude, right? If they tell them take a hike.
That's a really interesting question too. So when I work with people who have anger management issues due to it's first responders, and quite often they have a very short fuse due to the years and years of accumulated trauma. And so when they come home, I'm thinking of a police officer in particular. He'd come home from work and he needs to de-stress, but his wife is right there at the door waiting for him, asking him to do things, and she's been home with the kids all day, so now he has to take over, and his short fuse kicks in. He gets very very upset and he tends to walk out. But then she follows him and she's upset. So I had a meeting with both of them, and I asked them to think of the best time in their marriage, a vacation or something. And they had gone to the Dominican Republic and they were on a beach. And I said, so I'd like you to use beach as your code word. And when you say beach, when you come home from work and you're angry and frustrated and you're just about ready to explode, all I want you to do is say to your wife, beach. And the translation of that is, I love you. I'm going to be back, but right now I'm feeling like I'm about ready to explode and I need to go outside because I don't want to say something I will regret. So I'm going to go out and cool down for a bit and then I will come back, but I'm not deserting you. You couldn't explain all of that when you're mad. So all he says is beach. And she knows, don't follow him. He'll be back. He's going to go outside and he's going to run around the block or something. So even with a leader in an organization, you can have a code word and you can tell your employees, if I come to you and I say, California Beach or whatever it is, maybe a place where we've had a great retreat as a company. Maybe we went away for a weekend to some spa and we had a fabulous retreat and it's called Thermea Spa. So if I come to you and say Thermea Spa, what I'm saying is, I see you're getting to be a little bit agitated, and I'm suggesting you go grab a cup of tea or go for a little walk and come back when you're feeling ready to manage things. It's not a criticism, it's not a judgment. It's just I see you looking like I look when I feel that way. But if you say all of that, people aren't really able to listen when they're under stress. So if I just come and tap you on the shoulder and I say, spa day, then you know you have permission, like go grab a tea, do your deep breathing, because maybe we've caught it before you're so agitated that you're about ready to explode. That's another one of the strategy I like to use for people is start to recognize when you're starting up this path. There's a difference between the sudden emergency slamming on the brakes where you go and you can't do anything about that. You cannot stop that. I say to police officers all the time, stop telling people to not to swerve if an animal runs out in front of them because you're assuming they took time to think about what to do. They didn't think. Animal runs, slam on the brakes, swerve. It's an instant response. But the other situation is when we're starting to get mad. That lady down the hall in the office is really ticking me off. And I'm getting more ticked off, but I can start to feel it. And ideally, I want to recognize it in myself and know, like, okay, Diane, you know what? We're going to go outside and do some deep breathing before this becomes a problem. I'm going to go for a walk. My grown-up daughter, I love her to pieces. She can hear it in my voice when I'm overwhelmed and starting to be overworked. And she goes, Mom, you're sounding snippy. I love that word, snippy. I haven't gotten grouchy yet. I haven't said anything I'm going to regret, but she can hear the tone in my voice that I'm starting to get snippy. And when she says that, I go outside and dig in the dirt and do some weeding or snow shoveling or whatever I need to do. I go outside into my yard and do something physical for 10 minutes. It's like a magic trick. I work from home, so I can do that.
Yeah, and that is a very simple technique and powerful as well, to use code words when you recognize that you are undergoing stress. And you just mentioned that one of the ways that a leader can observe if they are their employee is going through stress is voice, the change in voice. Are there other observables?
I think most of us have a tell of some kind. For some of us, it might be voice. Many of the men that I work with, and I don't know whether it's because men typically have a firmer jawline or a chin line, but with men, I can often tell if they're getting tense because their jaw looks like it gets tense. I can't even describe what I'm seeing, but I see something, I see tension in the jaw. In women, I often see more of sort of a slumping, but it's really individual. So when you get to know the people that you work with, you start to realize, oh, when Dave gets upset, he gets the really tense jaw, and it looks like he's almost clenching his teeth. Oh, when Susie gets upset, she looks down a lot and mumbles when I ask her a question. It's paying attention to the people around you and figuring out what each person does. So, as I say, for me, it's tone of voice. My family notices a tone of voice. I guess I just get a little harsh or something. I'm not really sure, but they can tell.
Okay, so that's powerful, Diane, because what you're saying is that leaders need to observe the body language, get to know your people, so that you recognize the body language changes that will give you a hint. Now, what about besides using these code words, besides going out of the building when you have stress? Are there any other methods that employees can use, or rather not employees, but can employers do something to mitigate stress at work, universally or generally?
Yes. A good belly laugh is amazing medicine. And I often recommend to clients if I hear there's a good movie coming out that's a comedy or something, I'll say to people, "Oh, I've heard this movie's really funny. You want to find, movies that are belly laughs." If I were a leader and I had a small enough staff that we could all gather around my computer for 10 minutes every few days and watch something really, really funny that has us all just rolling in the aisles, almost laughing. That would be another strategy that I would use. Now, if I had a bigger company, I might even send all my employees a link to a YouTube video, and I would probably put something in the email like, unless you're talking to a client right now, stop what you are doing and watch this video. And then I'd probably hear giggles coming from, the other rooms. But just a 10-minute break. And, we get so caught up in the fact that, well, we have to work hard and be productive. Yes, we do. But there's a return on investment when we help people manage stress better. And so, as a boss, I might be thinking, oh, really? I'm going to give them 10 minutes off every day to watch a funny video. And I would go, yeah, because after that, they're going to be in such a better mood and they're going to be more productive and they're going to be happier at work. We know it costs 7 times as much to train a new employee as it does to retain someone. And employees don't usually leave just because of the money. I have bosses who've said to me, well, I pay them. I'm like, that's great. That's a great start. Everybody needs to be paid. But that's not what keeps people in a job usually. People stay in a job because they feel appreciated and valued and like they can have some fun and they enjoy going to work. So my role would be, yes, I'm going to pay you, but I'm also going to provide the kind of environment that you don't want to leave and go anywhere else, even if they offer you more money, because you feel valued and because I send you funny videos every day. And I let you go for a walk if you need to. And the return on investment is huge. People are far more productive and healthier.
Yeah, and Diane, that just reminds me, last week or the week before, Harvard Business Review had just published an article about why humor is a great tool for leaders to use. And I didn't read that article yet. Just reminded me I need to check it out. So there you go, guys. Use laughter, and if you are a leader who has no humor, I think you should learn to be humorous, or if not, then as Diane says, just find some YouTube videos and share with your people. And you had mentioned, Diane, and I'm sure quite a number of people, CEOs and executives are thinking, right question you mentioned just now, is it my job to share funny YouTube videos and take up 10 minutes of their time watching this? And you had mentioned ROI. So what is the ROI in reducing stress in the workplace?
Well, I mean, there have been a number of studies done that have looked, for example, at the decrease in productivity if your workforce isn't getting enough sleep, the decrease in productivity if you're in a workforce where people are unhappy. And I mean, the statistics are all over the map in terms of that. But what we do know is that people are more productive. We know, for example, from studies in education, children can't learn when they're under stress. And so we've taken that even, to the adult level. And we all know about ourselves. If you are preoccupied with something that's really, really bothering you, you are not functioning at optimal cognitive level. Whether it's because you haven't had enough sleep or you had a fight with your partner just before you left the house or you're worried about one of your children who's sick, when we are not able to concentrate fully, we are not as productive. So it would be hard to sort of look into, put that in a lab. I mean, you could do that with animals in an animal test of some kind, but with people, it's really hard to gauge that. But we know from even people working at home during COVID, a lot of people were working from home, and a lot of bosses were worried about, well, if they're allowed to work from home, they're not going to get anything done. What ended up happening? People were more comfortable. They didn't have the long commute in the morning. Productivity in many companies went up because people were still putting in the time that they needed to, but they were in an environment where they felt comfortable and less distractions. And a lot of companies are still letting people work from home because they said, hey, this has actually been really good for productivity for some strange reason. Another whole discussion would be the fact that introverts would do very well working from home, whereas extroverts would miss the social at the office because they're fed by the energy of other people. So that's another whole study we could do. But yeah, I would say that the return on investment you can't deny it. If you are in a sales environment, you probably could measure the increase in sales. You could look at how are my salespeople functioning now that we are putting some of these strategies in place. I mean, there are lots of studies that could be done to verify that, but I think it really is a lot of common sense. If people are happy in the workplace, they are cognitively more fit. They are more able to think and manage their tasks. We know that for a fact from scientific research.
Diane, talk about absenteeism. I know that's also a measure of ROI. So, what is the impact of lower stress on absenteeism?
Well, again, there's an enormous effect, and there was a stat that I read, and it had to do with when people in a company feel valued and heard, absenteeism goes down by 40%. Now, there are different reasons for that, and people may not be coming to work. If someone has cancer and need treatment, that doesn't necessarily, I'm not going to try to relate that back to stress. There are reasons why people, are more absent. But people taking a mental health day, people feeling really stressed out, unable to cope, that's extremely common. And when people feel they are in an environment where they can cope and they can go in, the absenteeism rates go down substantially. So again, it depends on the reason that someone is away, but there are a lot of people who sometimes just feel they're sleep deprived, no energy. I don't really like my job anyway. I need to take a mental health day. And those are the things that tend to be reduced when people feel like they're making a difference, they're valued, they're part of a team. The work ethic, it changes. So absenteeism, definitely the rates go down when people are in an environment where they are permitted to handle their stress instead of pretending it's fine, going into the work, how are you doing? Great, how are you? And the truth is, we're not great. Sometimes we're not great at all. But if you're working in a place where you can say, it's a bit of a rough day, but I'll do my best and feel accepted for that, you're going to do better than you think you would, right? If you feel heard and validated and your boss says, hey, you were sick last week. How are you feeling? If you need to take it easy today while you're recovering, just, do what you need to do to, don't push it if you're still recovering. Well, the next thing you know, that person's going to have a really good day versus coming in and feeling like I'm dragging myself around. I can't do this.
So it pays, Diane, for business owners and leaders to have a lower stress workplace because the ROI, I think, proves that you should do it. And just shifting gears a bit, Diane, we all age in the workplace. It's part of life. But how do we maintain our cognition as we age? Is that
Another
something?
great question. Yeah, another great question. Well, healthy living, for starters, all the things I've mentioned, sleep and exercise and proper nutrition and staying well hydrated will certainly help you. I'm also a big believer in doing cognitively challenging tasks to keep our brain cells active. Think of your brain, it's not a muscle. You know it's not a muscle, but think of it for a moment as a muscle. And if we are always doing things that are challenging us cognitively, we're strengthening those connections with the memory. So whether it's memory tests or Sudoku games or, things that we do, what I recommend that people do often is if you're reading a book, particularly if it's a work-related book, if you're very tired, you know that feeling when you read the same paragraph 3 times and you think, I have not been grasping any of this. That's a sign that, okay, right now I'm not at my cognitive peak. We all have circadian rhythms. We all have times of the day when we're sharper and times when we're more tired. And what I suggest is people try to figure out, when am I sharpest? And the way to do that is to read a page in a book, close the book, and see how much you can recite of that. And 9:30 in the morning, I think I'd be pretty good. 3:30 in the afternoon, not a chance. So we start to, and after lunch for many people is a dip. You come back after lunch, you sit at your desk, you're like, so schedule the tasks that require you to be really cognitively sharp for the times when you naturally are, and schedule the more menial sort of tasks or even client meetings, because, depending on how you're working with clients, talking to someone else keeps you awake and energized. But sort of schedule things around your own daily rhythm. But as we get older, we really need to work harder, I believe, at keeping cognitively healthy. I do all sorts of puzzles and my husband and I watch Jeopardy every single night. And it's a good day if all three of the contestants get the final Jeopardy wrong and I get it right. That happens very rarely. Usually at least one of them get it right, and I don't always get it right. But every once in a while, they'll all get it wrong, and I'm like, yay, I got it right. But I'm literally watching that show intensely concentrating as though I'm a contestant. And friends have said sometimes, oh, you should go be on that show, because I know a lot of useless trivia after 67 years of life. And I say, but my reflexes aren't fast because that's another part of aging, right? So often it's on the tip of my tongue and I just can't get it out fast enough. And I just have to accept that as I get older, my reflexes slow down. I need to write things down more. But instead of thinking, poor me, I'm getting older and I'm not as sharp, I think, what tools can I use to maintain my sharpness? Because I'm going to keep doing this until I'm no longer able to. So I need to really practice lots of, reading things and closing the book and testing my memory and memorizing poetry, memorizing all sorts of things, because as we get older, it's a little more challenging. And I figure that's made up for by the fact that we also have far more wisdom. It's a bit of a trade-off. I may be old, my memory may not be as sharp, but I've got 67 years of experience, so I can hold my own with a young'un.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you are saying, Diane, is that reading by itself is not going to help you improve cognition, but you need to do, as you said, puzzles, any kind of puzzles,
Yeah.
and can even be on TV, watching and participating by yourself. And what about writing? Would writing help? And when I talk about writing, I'm not referring to using the keyboard, but actually using pen and paper. Would that help improve your cognition?
I am so glad you asked that because, yes, studies have shown it's a completely different part of the brain that's activated when we write on paper and form letters versus on the keyboard. Typing, for those of us who took typing in school and can actually type pretty quickly, is almost rote. We don't remember what we've typed. Our thoughts are going right into the computer. When you're forming letters, it's a different part of the brain that is activated. So if you really want to remember something, if you make a grocery list, I would challenge people to try this. Make your grocery list one day on the computer and another day write it by hand and see which grocery list you remember more when you get to the store before you pull it out. So writing, yeah, good old fashioned pen and paper. I know when I was studying at university, we already had computers when I did my master's degrees. And, students would study, just by typing notes. And there's Diane with, her pen and her paper writing things out. But I would get into it. And I did my second degree. I did my second master's degree and graduated when I was 60. So I know what it's like to be at university as a senior. I did my first one I did my MBA in my 40s and my master's degree in clinical counseling in my 60s. 50s, late 50s. And I would still, by writing out the notes, get into an exam, and I would almost be able to close my eyes and picture the page that I had written the notes on, and I could see my notes. I would never do that with something I typed. I would never be able to remember. So, yeah, we use different strategies as we get older, and that's okay.
And that's a pity, Diane, because writing seems to have, gone the way of the dodo. Everybody prefers typing on the keyboard or even just dictating
Dictating,
with all
dictating.
the we have now. Yeah. So
Yeah,
those are all probably making us less, it's not, is decreasing our cognition totally. Dan, since most of the viewers of this podcast and listeners are in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries, where everything is evidence-based, and I'm sure these guys are probably asking, where is the evidence that,
mhm.
activity is increased after they implement stress mitigation interventions? Do you have any case studies?
I do. I do. I would recommend people read an article. It's called Stress Management and Employee Performance. It's available to the public. It's an article in the International Journal of Professional Business Review from November of 2023. And that talks a lot about how stress management has an impact on employee performance. And it's a peer-reviewed, scholarly article that is totally legitimate. The other article that I really enjoyed was taken from the Journal of Sleep, Frontiers of Sleep Journal. It's a 2024 study. I tend to only look at studies within the last 5 years. That's probably because I've come out of academia and research is changing all the time. So there are lots of great studies that were done. Well, in the 1970s, a lot of great research was done, but that's 50 years ago. So I just don't even use that. I tend to use the last 5 years. But it says that sleep and stress processes shape executive function. Evidence suggests that poor sleep regulation can lead to significant impairments in executive functions. Psychological stress can also directly impact a variety of executive functions, often leading to declines, but may additionally reduce executive function via its negative impact on sleep. So stress has that double-edged sword effect. When you're feeling stressed, it impacts your cognitive functioning because your brain bypasses cognitive functioning when you're under stress. Normally, something happens, we process it and decide how to respond. When you're under stress, something happens, we respond. That's in the woods, you hear the loud noise, you just run, you don't even think about it. But it also can have an impact on your sleep if you're under stress because it's more difficult to get into a solid sleep. People tend to wake up more often. So stress has a huge impact on sleep and cognitive functioning, which of course impacts your performance at work for sure.
Oh, great, Diane, because I think this is the proof for all business leaders out there, not just pharmaceutical and biotechnology
Mhm.
founders and CEOs, but I think if you're running a company or if you're an executive in an organization, every leader needs to take note that there are case studies, there is proof that when you mitigate stress, productivity increases. Is not an expense, it's an investment probably, and
Yeah,
it will do you well. So your people are happy, productivity increases, and you get a positive ROI as well. So what else do you need?
exactly. Yeah, and the
That,
research is very clear on this. It's not very controversial. The research, there's tons and tons of studies being done and articles being written, and they're easy to find.
and I like it, Diane, that these are all recent studies rather than, in over the last decade or so. So it shows that there's still a lot of research going on in
Yes.
neuroscience.
Yeah, there's so much we don't know still. The research is so exciting, and that's why I have to keep studying it because every year we're finding out more.
Diane, there are some medications that can cause sleep disruption or deprivation. So what can people do in such cases to improve their sleep while still being on that medication?
Okay, the first thing I recommend to all my clients is I speak to a pharmacist. Now, I'm in Canada. I don't know how it is, in Malaysia or even in the States, but in Canada, doctors don't get nearly as much training in pharmacology. I mean, even as a psychotherapist, I had to take an entire course in psychopharmacology, which is fascinating. But pharmacists spend years studying that. So I say to people, when your doctor prescribes this, and maybe one doctor's prescribed this and someone else has prescribed that, and the next thing you know, you're not able to sleep. I always say, make an appointment to talk to your pharmacist about the interactions of those medications that perhaps your doctor didn't really think about, but a pharmacist can look. I've had a number of clients who've gone to their pharmacist who said, "Oh my gosh, you're taking that. I don't know why they prescribed that. Those two are going to counteract each other." So I always say, have a relationship with your pharmacist because they've studied medication for years and they are more knowledgeable in terms of possible interactions. If you're having trouble sleeping, and it happens, someone's taking a medication for a very serious medical issue, they have to take that medication, but it does impact their sleep. And so that's when I say you want to do all you can for good sleep hygiene. There are people who can sleep very easily. I'm a former insomniac, and when I hit menopause, it got even worse. I have to work really, really hard, and I do. I am religious about being a super sleeper, but I work at it. It doesn't come naturally, whether that's, ADHD or being old, I don't know. But sleep, when I was a kid, I used to say to my parents, when I grow up, I'm never going to bed. So I'm not one of those kids who love to nap, and so I work really hard at it. And that's really why I wrote this short book on 14 nights to better sleep, because it's all the different strategies, from not eating late at night, from having a relaxing evening routine, don't watch the news late at night. Try all these different things to put yourself in the best possible sleep preparedness state.
So there you go, guys. If you need to improve your sleep while on medication, as Diane hinted, it's about discipline, it's about creating the right habits. And of course, go and speak to your pharmacist or go and speak to your doctor, depending on which country you are, because that would give you more expert advice. And Diane had also just mentioned about her ebook, 14 Nights to Better Sleep. And Diane, how can people get that book and how can they reach out to you if they wish to continue this discussion with you and work
Okay,
with you?
I would love to hear from people. So the book is available on Amazon all over the world. It's 99 cents US. It's a little booklet with you can get a sleep diary, and it really tells you each day for 14 days, here's something else to try. So if you go to Amazon and just Google Diane Wolf on Amazon or 14 Nights to Better Sleep, the booklet will come up for sure. And otherwise, my email address is Diane, just Diane, at Diane Wolf, DianeWolf.com. And if somebody would like to email me and they have any questions, I would be delighted to have a discussion.
And I'm also going to put in the description box below this video Diane's LinkedIn profile so you can connect with her and take this conversation further. And with that, Diane, I must thank you so much because you have given us so many strategies, and I hope everybody has taken notes as they are watching this. Or since this is a video, you can just replay the video, rewind and replay. So Diane, I look forward to probably having further conversations, when the time is right and there are new studies come up in this field. And for all those of you who are on this channel for the very first time, please like, subscribe, click the bell icon and select all notifications so that all future videos like this, you will get a notification and you can watch those videos. And if this video had brought you some value, please share it with your friends who may benefit from this as well. Bye and
Thank
see
you
you in
so much.